A family abandons their blind German Shepherd on the road, leaving him to fend for himself. But when a lone wolf finds the poor animal, something extraordinary happens. An unlikely bond forms between predator and prey, defying the laws of nature. This moving story of loyalty, survival, and redemption will touch your heart in unexpected ways. Prepare for an emotional journey that proves compassion exists even in the wild world. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. What could possibly arise from the meeting of the cruelest abandonment and the deepest loneliness? On a deserted road winding through the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia, under a fine autumn mist that seemed to weep for the fate of an innocent being, a golden-coated German Shepherd trembled uncontrollably. His desperate barks, a plea, echoing among ancient trees, chased the car that was now just a distant speck rounding a bend. The vehicle sped away, taking with it the last connection that animal had with the world of humans. With eyes clouded by the cataracts that had condemned him to abandonment, the dog pawed at the wet asphalt as if trying to decipher a cruel riddle. His paws, once steady in the yard he considered home, now faltered in the face of the unknown. The animal spun in confused circles, an agonizing ritual exposing his complete vulnerability. His muzzle, lifted towards a sky he couldn't see, tried to catch a familiar scent in the air, some clue of where to go when the path ahead is invisible. Night approached, bringing the biting cold typical of the Appalachian Mountains. For a domesticated, blind, abandoned dog, the sentence seemed sealed. Occasional cars sped past, indifferent to the trembling figure that had instinctively moved to the roadside. Tragedy seemed inevitable, merely waiting for the right moment to strike. But then something unexpected happened. A gray figure emerged silently from the dense woods bordering the road. Amber eyes, watchful and calculating, observed with curiosity the creature crying out its loneliness into the night. It was a wolf, one of the last of its kind in that region, a survivor carrying its own history of loss. Years of forced isolation, after being driven from his pack over territory disputes, had molded this wolf into a wary loner. His gray fur, marked with scars from old battles, told stories no human had ever heard. For a long time, he had roamed these mountains alone, hunting, surviving, existing without truly living. Until that moment. Something in the German Shepherd's desperation awakened a long-dormant feeling in the wolf. Was it recognition, empathy, or simply the primitive call of one species recognizing a common ancestor in another? The reasons remain a mystery, but the actions that followed would forever change the destiny of these two beings. The wolf approached with the caution of one who knows the dangers of the world. His steps, almost silent on the damp leaves, didn't alert the blind dog still lamenting his fate. When they were finally just a few feet apart, the German Shepherd froze. His keen sense of smell detected a wild, unknown, potentially lethal presence. A defensive growl rumbled in his throat, the last resort of one who cannot see his adversary. The wolf paused, analyzing. In any other situation, a domestic dog would be seen as an intruder, a competitor, or at best, prey. But at that moment, under the silvery moonlight beginning to peek through scattered clouds, the extraordinary occurred. The wolf circled the German Shepherd and, with a delicate movement contradicting his wild nature, touched the dog's muzzle with his own. It was a brief, almost imperceptible contact, yet heavy with meaning. The dog, surprised by the unexpected gesture, silenced his growl. His tense body relaxed slightly. The wolf repeated the movement, this time nudging towards the side of the road, then returned, touching the German Shepherd again as if inviting him to follow. On the third try, the dog understood. With hesitant steps, he began to follow the scent of this strange guide. The wolf, patient as only great predators can be, adjusted his pace to that of his newfound companion. When the German Shepherd hesitated at an obstacle or strayed from the path, the wolf returned and redirected him with gentle nudges of his muzzle. Thus, against all odds, against all natural laws that should have separated these two creatures, an improvised alliance formed under the starry West Virginia sky. One step at a time, they moved away from the dangerous road, entering the relative safety of the forest. The journey was slow, punctuated by moments of tension. The dog, accustomed to the comfort of a home, startled at the nocturnal sounds of the woods, the melancholic hoot of an owl, the rustling of leaves under unseen paws, the occasional snap of dry twigs. Each new noise made him stop, trembling. In these moments, the wolf waited, a constant presence that, inexplicably, conveyed safety. After what felt like an eternity to the weary German shepherd, they reached a spot where the smell of damp earth was stronger. The wolf led his new companion into a shallow cave hidden among moss-covered rock formations. The interior was surprisingly dry, sheltered from the elements. In the back of the cave, a bed of dry leaves revealed the lone wolf's resting place. Exhausted by the emotional and physical ordeal, the German shepherd finally allowed himself to collapse onto the cool cave floor. His body trembled not just from cold, but from the exhaustion of fighting abandonment, fear, and death all in one day. The wolf, after circling the perimeter of his territory as he did every night, returned and, in a gesture defying explanation, lay down beside the dog, sharing his body heat. That night, under the autumn sky of West Virginia, one of the most improbable partnerships nature had ever witnessed was born. A wild wolf and a blind German shepherd, united by fate, loneliness, and perhaps something deeper that humans still struggle to fully comprehend. With the dawn, a routine as unusual as it was necessary for their mutual survival was established. The wolf, an experienced hunter, brought food back to the shelter. At first, small rodents that the German shepherd, still tied to his domestic life, hesitated to eat. As days passed, however, hunger spoke louder than habit. Soon he learned to accept his protector's gifts. In return, the German shepherd offered something the wolf in his years of solitude had forgotten: companionship. The cold mountain nights, once silent and lonely, were now filled with the warmth of another living being. For social animals like canids, this simple fact represented a profound change. But the German shepherd's contribution went beyond mere presence. What he lacked in sight, he compensated for with smell and hearing. On several occasions, his restless behavior alerted the wolf to approaching humans long before they were visible. This ability proved crucial when hunters occasionally passed through the area. A unique language developed between them, made of soft growls, nose nudges, and body postures. The German shepherd learned that a certain type of bark from the wolf meant imminent danger. The wolf, in turn, understood that when the dog circled agitatedly, sniffing insistently, it signaled approaching humans. Together, they faced the onset of winter in the Appalachian Mountains, where morning fog wrapped the landscape in a ghostly shroud and nightly frosts crystallized the vegetation. For the German shepherd, used to the comfort of a home, the adaptation was difficult. But the alternative, the loneliness of the road, was a distant thought that occasionally still invaded his dreams, manifesting in nighttime whimpers that the wolf silenced with his comforting presence. Meanwhile, in the small town of Harmony Creek, the presence of a wolf roaming the outskirts began to create a buzz. In a region where these animals had become rare due to hunting and habitat destruction, sightings were treated with a mix of fear and almost mystical reverence. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a retired biology teacher who had dedicated 40 years of her life to teaching at the town's only public high school, kept her love for nature alive through regular observations of local wildlife. At 72, she retained the scientific curiosity and enthusiasm that had captivated generations of students. When she heard the reports about the wolf, she decided to investigate herself. With her old camera and a trail cam purchased specifically for documenting nocturnal animals, Mrs. Vance set up equipment at strategic points in the woods. Initially, she captured only blurry, inconclusive images, a gray shape between trees, eyes reflecting the camera's infrared light. Until one cold June morning, checking the overnight recordings, she stumbled upon images that challenged her scientific understanding and deeply touched her heart. The photo sequence clearly showed the wolf patiently guiding a golden-coated German shepherd through the woods. The dog, his clouded eyes revealing his blindness, carefully followed the cues of his unlikely guide. Mrs. Vance, accustomed to scientific objectivity, felt tears stream down her wrinkled face. In 50 years of studying animal behavior, she had never witnessed anything like it. These images defied everything the textbooks taught about interspecies relationships, especially between predators and domesticated animals. Determined to document this extraordinary phenomenon, she began tracking the animals from a distance, taking meticulous notes in the green-covered notebook that had been with her since college. Her observations revealed fascinating patterns. How the wolf seemed to adjust his behavior to accommodate his companion's visual limitations. How he demonstrated patience waiting for the German Shepherd to navigate difficult terrain. How they communicated through an apparently elaborate system of sound and touch signals. During one such observation, using a powerful spotting scope, Mrs. Vance noticed something the cameras had missed. The German Shepherd wore a collar worn by time and weather. Photographing with her most powerful lens, she managed to distinguish what looked like a small metal tag attached to the collar. Although she couldn't read the engraving, the discovery confirmed her suspicions. This was not a feral dog, but an abandoned pet. With this information, she sought out Dr. Richard Miller, the local veterinarian, a man in his early 50s known as much for his skill with animals as for his reserved demeanor. Initially skeptical about the report of a wolf caring for a blind dog, his expression changed completely upon seeing the photographs. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, adjusting his glasses to examine the images better. "If I didn't know your scientific integrity, Mrs. Vance, I'd think these were doctored." Together they devised a delicate plan, gradually gain the animals' trust without interfering with their remarkable partnership. The first step would be leaving food at strategic locations, creating a positive association with the human scent. Dr. Miller suggested raw meat for the wolf and high-quality dog food for the German Shepherd, recognizing their different nutritional needs. "We need to be extremely cautious," the vet warned, preparing the first portions in separate containers. Any sudden move could scare the wolf, who has likely had negative experiences with humans. And the German Shepherd, though domesticated, may have developed fear after being abandoned. The approach was slow, methodical, requiring patience only. People like Mrs. Vance, accustomed to nature's rhythms, could sustain. In the first few weeks, the animals detected the food but wouldn't approach if there was a recent human scent. Over time, they began to accept the food. First the wolf, more pressured by the need to feed himself and his companion. Then the German Shepherd himself. Parallel to this story unfolding in the mountains, 30 miles away, at Maple Ridge Farm, a family grappled with the weight of a painful secret. The property, once prosperous, faced financial difficulties after consecutive years of drought had punished the crops that had sustained the family for 3 generations. Anthony, a 60-year-old man whose rigidity masked a tormented heart, watched his 16-year-old daughter Lisa with growing concern. The teenager who had always filled the house with her easy laugh and infectious energy now moved like a silent shadow through the rooms. Her young face bore a premature seriousness, and her once lively eyes seemed constantly lost in distant, painful thoughts. Her mother, Teresa, tried futilely to penetrate the wall of silence her daughter had built. "It's just a phase," she repeated to her husband, not believing her own words. In her heart, she knew exactly when the change began. 3 months ago, when Thor, the German Shepherd who had been Lisa's companion since childhood, mysteriously disappeared. What the teenager didn't know, or pretended not to know, was that there was no mystery to Thor's disappearance. On a night of financial desperation, after receiving the prohibitive estimate for treating the cataracts progressively blinding the animal, Anthony made the decision that now poisoned his conscience. He put the dog in the car, drove miles to a deserted road, and abandoned him there, convincing himself some kind driver would pick him up. The silent guilt corroded the family from within. Lisa, who had witnessed Thor's worsening blindness and pleaded for the resources for his treatment, never verbalized her suspicions about her father's role in the disappearance. Instead, she retreated into an inner world where she collected newspaper clippings about abandoned animals and wrote letters to her lost companion, letters kept in a shoebox under her bed. like tiny fragments of a shattered heart. Tension at Maple Ridge Farm peaked when Anthony found one of the newspaper clippings dropped in the hallway. The article discussed the rise in animal abandonment in the region and cited an alarming statistic. Only 1 in 10 abandoned animals survives more than a week on the roads. Turning the page, he found an unfinished letter from Lisa, where she wrote, "Thor, I know Dad lied about you running away. I know what he did." The guilt, that invisible burden on his shoulders, suddenly became concrete, palpable in his daughter's accusing words. That night, Anthony couldn't sleep. Sitting on the farmhouse porch under a starry sky that seemed to judge him, he cried for the first time since his own father's death 20 years earlier. Meanwhile, in the small town of Harmony Creek, the first major complication arose. A group of local hunters spotted the wolf during an outing and, ignoring wildlife protection laws, decided to organize a hunt to capture him. To them, the wild animal represented both a trophy and a potential threat to livestock on neighboring farms. The TD news quickly reached Mrs. Vance through her nephew, who worked at the town's only gas station, where the hunters had openly discussed their plans. Alarmed, she mobilized her circle of friends, former students, and animal welfare supporters. Within hours, she organized an emergency meeting at the community church, the only space large enough to accommodate a crowd. The meeting, initially tense, transformed completely when Mrs. Vance presented the images of the wolf, carefully guiding the blind German shepherd. The projection on the white wall of the vestry caused a profound silence, followed by emotional murmurs. That demonstration of interspecies compassion touched something primal in the hearts of those present. "This wolf is not a bloodthirsty monster, as some would have us believe," declared Mrs. Vance with the firm voice she had used for decades, teaching generations of students. "He is caring for a being more vulnerable than himself. What more powerful example of kindness could we ask for?" Reverend Thompson, an elderly man respected for his wisdom, rose slowly from his seat. Everyone fell silent, awaiting his words. "There are times when God sends us signs through the most unlikely creatures," he said, pointing to the images. "This wolf, feared by many, is teaching us about compassion and care for the most fragile among us. What man could do better?" The assembly decided unanimously to protect the animals. A monitoring group was formed to take turns ensuring the hunters didn't carry out their plans. Mrs. Vance and Dr. Miller intensified their efforts to gain the trust of the unlikely pair, now driven not just by scientific fascination, but by an urgent need for protection. The Appalachian winter continued its course with dense morning fog and biting cold nights. On one such morning, when nature seemed suspended in time, wrapped in a mist that turned the landscape almost dreamlike, the first major turning point of this story occurred. During a particularly violent storm, lightning struck an ancient tree near the wolf and German shepherd's shelter. The impact was devastating. The massive trunk fell directly onto the cave entrance, injuring the German shepherd who, disoriented by the deafening noise, was trying to exit the shelter. The wolf escaped narrowly, leaping aside at the last second. Mrs. Vance and Dr. Miller, monitoring the animals from a distance that morning, witnessed the accident. Without hesitation, they ran towards the site, ignoring the torrential rain soaking their clothes in seconds. What they found was a distressing scene. The German shepherd partially trapped under a heavy branch, whining in pain, while the wolf circled agitatedly, trying unsuccessfully to move the obstacle with his powerful jaws. Noticing the human approach, the wolf's amber eyes fixed on the newcomers. There was a moment of palpable tension. The predator, clearly defensive, partially bared his teeth. Mrs. Vance, understanding the delicacy of the moment, stopped a few yards away and spoke in the softest voice she could manage. "It's okay. We're here to help. We'll get your friend out." The words themselves meant little to the animal, but the calm tone and non-threatening posture established a deeper communication. The wolf backed away a few steps, still watchful, but allowing the humans to approach the injured German shepherd. Dr. Miller quickly assessed the situation. The heavy branch had pinned the dog's hind leg, possibly fracturing it. There was a deep gash on his flank, bleeding moderately. "He needs immediate medical attention," the vet determined. mentally calculating the risk of infection and internal bleeding. Together, Mrs. Vance and the veterinarian managed to lift the branch enough to free the animal. With extreme care, Dr. Miller improvised a stretcher using his sturdy coat, and with the teacher's help, transported the German Shepherd to the jeep parked on the nearest trail. Throughout the rescue, the wolf watched from a safe distance, his gaze never leaving his injured companion. When the German Shepherd was placed in the vehicle, the wild animal followed the jeep for a few yards, until the speed made it impossible to keep up. His lonely howl echoed through the forest as the vehicle drove away, carrying his only friend towards an uncertain fate. At the modest but well-equipped veterinary clinic, Dr. Miller worked intensely to save the German Shepherd. X-rays confirmed a fracture in the hind leg and revealed 2 cracked ribs. The deep flank wound required several stitches. During the thorough examination, the vet carefully cleaned the worn collar and finally managed to read the metal tag. Thor, a simple name, engraved on the oxidized metal, with no contact information. "Thor," murmured Mrs. Vance, gently stroking the sedated animal's head. "So that's your name." In the days that followed, while Thor recovered at the vet clinic, something extraordinary happened. The wolf, who had never before approached inhabited areas, began circling the clinic's surroundings at night. Staff reported hearing scratching at the back doors and, occasionally, low howls that sounded like calls. Dr. Miller, intrigued by this behavior that defied everything he knew about wild wolves, installed cameras that captured stunning footage. The animal arrived consistently at the same time, circled the building several times, sniffed insistently at windows and doors, and often sat in front of the back entrance as if waiting. "It's remarkable," he commented to Mrs. Vance, watching the nighttime recordings. "He's looking for his companion. He misses him." The news of the unusual rescue soon graced the pages of the regional newspaper. The report, written by a young journalist, thrilled with the story, included a photo of the German Shepherd at the clinic, mentioning his distinctive collar and blindness. The sensational headline, "Wild Wolf and Blind Dog: The Unlikely Friendship That Moved Harmony Creek," attracted readers statewide. At Maple Ridge Farm, during a breakfast as silent as all family meals had become, Lisa distractedly flipped through the newspaper. Her heart nearly stopped when her eyes fixed on the photograph of a golden-coated German Shepherd with cataract-clouded eyes. The collar, even worn, was unmistakable. She herself had chosen that braided leather model for Thor's 5th birthday. "It's him," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion held back for months. "It's Thor." Her parents, seated at the table, looked at her in surprise. It was the first time in months they had heard her voice carry any emotion other than restrained sadness. Teresa picked up the newspaper, quickly read the report, and her face paled. She lifted her eyes to her husband, a silent accusation hanging between them. "He's alive," Lisa continued, the words tumbling out between sobs. "All this time, he survived." Without waiting for her parents' reaction, she stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "I need to go there, now." Teresa, understanding her daughter's emotional urgency, grabbed the car keys without consulting her husband. "Let's go," she said simply. Anthony, paralyzed by guilt and the public revelation of his act, remained seated at the table as mother and daughter hurried off towards the neighboring town. The 30-mile drive seemed endless to Lisa, who alternated between silent tears and anxious questions about Thor's condition. When they finally arrived at the small veterinary clinic, they were greeted by a receptionist surprised by the teenager's agitation. "We came to see Thor, the German Shepherd who was rescued," Teresa explained, keeping a protective arm around her daughter's shoulders. "We believe he belongs to us." The receptionist, instructed to be cautious about potential claims for the locally famous animal, asked them to wait while she called Dr. Miller. The vet, hearing the animal's name mentioned, approached with a serious expression, assessing the newcomers with clinical eyes. "You say the German Shepherd belongs to you," he began, choosing his words carefully. "Can you tell me how long he's been missing?" 3 months, Lisa answered quickly, before her mother could intervene. "He disappeared exactly 3 months and 2 days ago." "And the cataracts?" Were you aware of his condition? The question, seemingly simple, carried an accusatory weight that didn't escape Teresa's notice. She hesitated, searching for words that wouldn't incriminate her husband. But Lisa, with the brutal honesty of youth, replied, "Yes, we got an estimate for the surgery, but my dad said it was too expensive." After that, Thor disappeared. She made air quotes around the last word. Dr. Miller observed the teenager closely, noting the mix of pain and anger in her expression. He recognized the genuine love for the animal, but also the awareness of a deep family betrayal. After a moment's reflection, he decided, "Come with me. Thor is recovering from serious injuries, but he's stable." He led them down a hallway to a room in the back, adapted as a recovery area. There, on an improvised bed of soft blankets, lay Thor. His hind leg was immobilized, and a bandage wrapped his torso. Hearing the door open, he lifted his head slightly, his muzzle sniffing the air. The recognition was instantaneous and powerful. A tremor ran through the animal's body as he tried to stand despite his injuries. A sharp whine, almost childlike in its desperate joy, escaped his throat. Lisa ran to him, falling to her knees beside the makeshift bed. "Thor," she sobbed, burying her face in the golden fur of his neck. "Forgive me. Forgive me for not being able to protect you." The scene was interrupted by a sudden noise from the back door. Insistent scratching followed by a low sound, almost a call. Dr. Miller recognized it immediately. "It's the wolf," he explained, seeing Teresa's confused expression. "He comes every night looking for Thor." "The wolf?" Lisa questioned, lifting her tear-streaked face. "The one from the article? The one who was taking care of Thor?" The vet confirmed with a nod. They formed an extraordinary partnership. The wolf guided Thor through the forest, hunted for him, protected him. I've never seen anything like it. In my entire career. The noise at the door intensified, as if the animal outside sensed the agitation inside the clinic. Dr. Miller, making an impulsive decision against all safety protocols, headed towards the back door. "I'm going to let him, and briefly, into a controlled area," he explained. "I want you to see their reaction. It's something that needs to be witnessed to be understood." Teresa, alarmed, pulled Lisa closer. "Is it safe? A wild wolf inside the clinic?" "Normally, I'd say no," the vet admitted. "But this wolf has shown such atypical behavior that I'm willing to take a calculated risk. We'll stay at a safe distance, observing through the glass of the adjacent room." Dr. Miller led mother and daughter into an observation room and, using a double-door system, allowed the wolf to enter the enclosure where Thor was. The wild animal hesitated briefly at the entrance, analyzing the unfamiliar environment. His amber eyes, watchful and cautious, swept the space until they fixed on the prone figure of the German Shepherd. What followed was a scene Lisa would never forget. The wolf slowly approached Thor, who, despite his limited vision, immediately recognized his companion's scent. The German Shepherd tried again to get up, this time managing to sit despite obvious discomfort. The two animals touched, muzzle to muzzle, in a delicate gesture that seemed like a greeting between old friends. The wolf carefully circled the dog, sniffing his injuries, emitting low sounds that seemed almost like questions. Thor responded with small whines as if telling his story. "It's incredible," murmured Dr. Miller, observing the interaction. "They've developed their own language." Lisa watched the scene, silent tears streaming down her face. The guilt she carried over Thor's abandonment was partially eased by the revelation that he had found not only survival, but also companionship and protection in the most unlikely form. "What happens now?" she asked without taking her eyes off the touching scene before her. "Thor, can he come home with us when he's recovered?" The question, seemingly simple, opened a Pandora's box of complexities Dr. Miller had been avoiding. He exchanged a meaningful look with Mrs. Vance, who had just arrived at the clinic, and joined them in the observation room. "It's not that simple," the vet began cautiously. "Thor and the wolf have developed a deep bond. Separating them would be traumatic for both. Besides," he hesitated, searching for the most delicate way to phrase his thought. "Besides," Mrs. Vance continued, taking on the difficult task. We need to consider what's best for Thor. He was abandoned when he needed care the most. The statement, though gentle in tone, was sharp in its implication. Lisa flinched as if struck. "It wasn't me," she protested, her voice thick with emotion. "I begged them not to take him." "We know that, dear," Mrs. Vance replied, placing a comforting hand on the teenager's shoulder. "But we need to think about his well-being now." The conversation was interrupted by Anthony's unexpected arrival. The man, visibly worn down, stopped at the door of the observation room. His eyes, marked by deep dark circles, fixed first on his daughter, then on the scene beyond the glass. The wolf now lying protectively beside the German shepherd. "I came to own up to what I did," he declared, his voice hoarse from long suppressed emotions. "I was the one who abandoned Thor on the road. I thought someone would find him quickly, someone who could afford the treatment for his eyes." The silence following his confession was heavy, laden with unspoken judgments. Dr. Miller was the first to break it. "Are you aware that animal abandonment is a crime? That you could be prosecuted for this?" Anthony nodded slowly. "I'm aware, and I accept the consequences." There was a sad dignity in his posture, that of a man finally facing the weight of his actions. "But before anything else, I want to ask my daughter for forgiveness. And if I could, I'd ask Thor for forgiveness too." Lisa, who had maintained physical and emotional distance from her father for months, observed him with eyes mixing hurt and a dawning compassion. The man before her wasn't the authoritarian patriarch she had known all her life, but someone broken by the weight of his own conscience. "What do you suggest then?" asked Dr. Miller, his professional tone partly masking his disapproval. "Thor is recovering well physically, but he'll still need care. And there's the matter of the wolf. I want to do what's best for Thor," Anthony replied, surprising everyone with the humility in his voice. "If that means he doesn't come home with us, I'll accept it. If it means paying for his cataract surgery, I'll find a way." Mrs. Vance, closely observing the family dynamics, intervened with the wisdom of someone who spent decades mediating classroom conflicts. "Perhaps we can find a solution that benefits everyone. I've been observing these two animals for weeks, and I can say with certainty that separating them would be cruel. At the same time, Thor clearly recognizes his family, especially Lisa." She paused, organizing thoughts she'd been developing since first sighting the extraordinary pair. "I'm thinking of proposing to the town council and environmental agencies the creation of a small educational sanctuary. A place where the wolf could live in semi-freedom, Thor would receive the necessary care, and both could remain together." The idea, planted like a seed in the fertile ground of guilt and the desire for redemption, immediately began to sprout. Dr. Miller, initially skeptical about the logistical feasibility, soon grew enthusiastic about the possibilities. "We could turn this into an educational center on conservation and animal behavior. Schools could visit, learn about the importance of preserving native species like the wolf, about responsibility towards domestic animals." "And could my family participate?" Lisa asked timidly. "Could I visit Thor regularly?" "More than that," replied Mrs. Vance, an enthusiastic sparkle appearing in her tired eyes. "You could be an active part of the project. With your connection to Thor and your obvious love for animals, you'd be a valuable contributor." The seed planted by Mrs. Vance quickly grew in the following months. The case of the wolf and the German shepherd, published in regional newspapers and shared on social media, attracted national attention. Environmentalists, veterinarians, and curious onlookers traveled to the small town of Harmony Creek to witness the extraordinary partnership between the animals. With the support of the town council, recognizing the story's tourism and educational potential, a 5-acre area was designated for the future sanctuary. Environmental agencies, initially resistant to the idea of keeping a wolf in semi-freedom, yielded to the evidence of the animal's atypical behavior and his bond with the German shepherd. News of the sanctuary's creation attracted the attention of a large cosmetics company, seeking inspiring stories for its new advertising campaign. The financial offer to use the image of the wolf and dog was substantial, funds that could accelerate the sanctuary's construction and financed Thor's much-needed cataract surgery. The community was divided. Some saw the opportunity as providential, a quick way to realize the project and improve Thor's quality of life. Others, led by Mrs. Vance, feared the commercial exploitation of the story and the disturbance media exposure could cause the animals. In a tense meeting held in the church hall, voices rose defending different positions. The discussion seemed endless until Lisa, usually shy in large crowds, asked to speak. With newfound confidence, she stood before the attendees. "Thor and the wolf aren't products to be sold," she declared, her youthful voice carrying a conviction that silenced the assembly. "They are living beings who found companionship and protection in each other when we humans failed them. Using their story to sell products would be another form of abandonment." Her words, simple but deeply felt, touched something essential in those present. The cosmetics company's offer was politely declined, and the community decided to seek alternative funding through donations and partnerships with universities and environmental institutions. 6 months after the dramatic rescue in the forest, the biggest turning point in this extraordinary journey occurred. The cataract surgery, funded by an online fundraising campaign that moved people across the country, was performed successfully. Thor, now recovered from his physical injuries, had the chance to see the world around him again, albeit partially. The moment the German Shepherd saw his wolf friend for the first time was recorded on video by Dr. Miller's team. The recording, shared with careful permission on social media, instantly went viral. It shows Thor, still hesitant with his newly recovered vision, gradually recognizing the figure of the wolf. The dog freezes momentarily, as if visually processing what he had known only by scent and sound. Then, in a movement of pure joy, he eagerly approaches his protector, licking his muzzle in a gesture transcending species and expectations. The scene moved millions of viewers, reinforcing popular support for the sanctuary under construction. Donations poured in from all over the country, allowing the project to accelerate. Anthony, seeking redemption, offered his construction skills, personally leading the building of the enclosures and necessary structures. A full year passed since that rainy autumn night when Thor was abandoned on a deserted road. The date was marked by the official opening of the Wolf and Shepherd Sanctuary, a name chosen by popular vote. The site, once an underutilized area bordering the forest reserve, had transformed into an environmental education center already, attracting visitors from neighboring towns. Thor and the wolf, whom biologists respectfully began calling Guardian, had a large natural enclosure replicating the forest habitat where they formed their partnership. Discreet but effective fences ensured their safety and that of visitors, while allowing the animals to maintain their routine of joint exploration. The opening ceremony brought together local authorities, environmentalists, journalists, and, most importantly, the true protagonists of this story. Mrs. Vance, whose scientific curiosity and emotional sensitivity enabled the documentation of the extraordinary friendship. Dr. Miller, whose veterinary skills saved Thor's life. Anthony's family, especially Lisa, whose determination not to give up on her childhood friend inspired an entire community. During the opening speech, a moving sight captured everyone's attention. The wolf and the German Shepherd, lying side by side on a small grassy rise, calmly observing the unusual activity in their territory. Thor, his vision now partially restored, stayed close to his guide and protector. The wolf, ever alert, remained serene in the presence of his improbable friend. Lisa, watching the scene, felt a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The guilt over Thor's abandonment, which was never truly hers, finally dissipated completely. In its place grew a luminous certainty. Sometimes, the most beautiful endings are born from the most painful new beginnings. The young woman, transformed by the experiences of the past months, approached the microphone when invited to say a few words. With the firm voice she discovered within herself during this journey, she declared, "Thor and Guardian taught us that true compassion knows no barriers, not of species nor of circumstance. They found each other in the darkness of abandonment, and loneliness, and together, they created their own light. Today, that light expands and illuminates us too. As she spoke, the late afternoon sun cast golden shadows over the sanctuary. Thor and the wolf, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment, watched the scene from their shared resting place. Their bodies, relaxed against each other, silently told the most extraordinary story. How the cruelest abandonment and the deepest loneliness can, against all odds, transform into the most improbable and beautiful of friendships. On the horizon, the sun set over the Appalachian Mountains, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. A new night approached, but this time, neither Thor nor the wolf would face the darkness alone. Never again.